So today we're talking about Foundational Friday brainstorming. What that means is, if you look at all of our verticals, Alex alluded to them a little earlier in the week, we've got Mondays are focused on business, Tuesdays focused on graphics, Wednesdays are audio, Thursdays are video, and Fridays are IT and infrastructure. Sometimes we call it logistics, but really it's the how do we get things done, and how do we build what we need in order to support our productions. And more, especially as we're going more into the cloud, we see the IT side of that growing. You're needing to set up VPNs for remote access, or setting up VLANs in order to isolate different parts of your network for Dante or 2110 or NDI. And so I'm going to start by just rattling off a little list of where what we've done so far for Fridays. And then I was curious to get from the rest of the group, like, what are your joys and concerns? What are you liking? What could you see less of? What would you like to see more of? What's really interesting you? Because I like to say not any one of us is as smart as all of us. And so all the life experience that comes in, not only from this panel, but also from our producers, helps us understand the challenges and the things that are really at the forefront of your interest right now. So this second hour is going to be a little bit more suggestions necessarily than questions, but we're just really looking for feedback and trying to make sure that we're focusing this vertical, which can go in a lot of different directions, in what interests you the most. So if we look, we started talking about getting signals in and out of events with backhauls. We talked about gen locking cameras together, physical storage, actually where do we put things, which I really enjoyed, because we had to think not only about in a small space like this studio that I'm in right now, but also on a much larger scale in terms of what if you ran a rental house, or what if you ran a production warehouse. We did talk about VLANs, just kind of as an overview of it. We didn't get super in depth, but we had a lot of fun. Good friend Nathan Schlegel came on to tell some of his stories about his live stage design and production design. Had a couple weeks where we were diving into NAB, so we talked about what were our plans for the NAB coverage. We talked about an update on as those plans solidified, and then later we had a kind of a post-mortem retrospective on how did we do it? What did we end up doing? Other live coverage that we talked about was we did a recap of how Office Hours covered the eclipse. So we took the team that was out in Ohio with me, and folks from all over the country were contributing and sharing how they achieved that. Guy Cochran did a tremendous job with Tenacious Ventures, with one of the coolest studio tours to see someone really on the cutting edge. And then we hung out a couple of weeks ago to talk about latest in the cloud. So Jeff was on that show, and he was always illuminating. I feel enriched every time. And then finally, last week we talked about what's in our bag. What do we carry around when we're traveling and going all over the place? So we've touched a little bit on IT. We've touched a little bit about production in the cloud. We've tried to pick in a few vendors here and there. And that's kind of where we're at the moment. So I'd love to hear more from the panel, to hear what you guys have to say. And was there anything that really scratched your itch, so to speak? David, I think you had something?
Well, yeah, I just wanted a little background on the foundational versus foundation. When Josh put it out there, foundational being the adjective, I figured was right for the Friday, and it's alliterative, so it's Foundational Friday. As far as topics, etc., like Jeff and some of the other folks know, I'm leaning into NDI for work reasons. So getting my head around the basic concept of that is something I'm looking forward to, and I hope we can do some deeper dives into structuring. The pre-show we were talking about NDI routers, etc. So those are the kind of things that jazz me for now.
And especially with Blackmagic at NAB talking a lot about their implementation of 2110. Any of this AV over IP, whether we're talking Dante or NDI or 2110, it is the topic of the day for sure, and it's probably not only the most exciting, but also the thing that's moving the most quickly, because these standards are changing all the time and what the capabilities are changing all the time. Jeff, go ahead.
I would echo what David is saying. I really would like us to focus, and we're talking about just generally brainstorming now about the show content, right? So
yes, sir.
To go into the technical side of things. I think we need to go more into the technical side of things instead of just saying, oh, let's talk about what does NDI do, or let's just talk about 2110. We need to do a show specific to a point of NDI and backhaul, or 2110, when do you use it? Is this the right implementation of it? So there are definitely a lot of challenges, and maybe 2110 is over the heads of the 99% of the people that are watching our show. Okay, but NDI is not. NDI is for the masses, and I think that we could definitely help by educating more people about that, about the uses of it and what could be done and its advantages. And I just feel like we need to spend more time instead of the gloss over on the top side of it, we need to be a little bit more in digging into the deeps. That's what we really need to focus on, is deeper dives.
Yeah, and certainly folks like yourself who are doing it, who are in production, who have the real experience, being able to walk us through how are you configuring a router for these different protocols? How are you configuring your whether it's your VPN or whether it's your or whether it's whatever your network scheme is. We can study it, we can read about it, we can talk about it, but there's no teacher like life experience. And that's why we're so fortunate to have people like Jeff that bring that and share that with us. I think we all benefit. Alexander?
Yeah, I think those are all good suggestions, especially the NDI stuff. I don't really use NDI, but I've always been curious about it. One of the things that I've always been curious about is what about only running NDI audio on a network versus the requirements for video, and is audio not as stressful on the network as video and that type of stuff. So I think going deeper into NDI would be really great. One of the things that I'm curious too to talk about in future conversations is media management for production. I think that's one of the things that I don't have that down perfect yet, and with respect to storage and how do you organize things and how you label things. I mean, I frequently with all these external drives that I have, and I label everything too, but sometimes, I grab the wrong drive for production. And so just keeping track of what files are where, that sort of stuff, tips and tricks, stuff like that for any type of production, I think would be very valuable.
David?
Yeah, and I'll step it back one more just from the way my head works, that foundational thing. When I sat and thought about that, and I reflected on when I got into this business, my mentor at the time told me, understand the basics and everything else falls into place. And I've lived by that for about 30 years now. So sure, it's fun to jump into the deep end of the pool, but sometimes you don't know how to tread water. So by getting that foundation set, you're building on best practices and best procedures, etc. And I think that's going to be huge for the community at large and for folks that are looking to get started in new technologies and stuff.
Yeah, Alexander, you kind of piqued my interest a little bit there, because I actually ran into a situation yesterday where I was getting a behind the scenes tour of a studio in one of the arenas near me, and one of the editors in there was like, yeah, I'm on an Avid. Like we're still doing everything in Avid. And I said, wow, Avid for live sports, and for cutting packages together. That's super interesting. What is the thing that's holding you here? Or what's the biggest benefit to it? And she mentioned to me that, well, we're capturing about a half a terabyte per game at 40 games a year. So and everything is and all of our highlights, all of our archival footage, everything that we've digitized, all of those assets are in the Avid. And so our ability to connect that to other systems, and to see what it would take to move something like that is more of a lift than we can do, because we can't afford to stop production. And I had never. It's obvious when you think about it in hindsight. Like, of course, live sports where you have a lot of cameras that are capturing games. For every game during a whole season, you're going to generate a tremendous amount of media. But I didn't have a good answer for it, because I had never, up until that point, thought about it on that scale, about what solutions. So I think that that whole digital asset management angle and managing large libraries would be a pretty compelling topic for me anyway. We got one in from Craig McFarland. Why don't we'll switch it up a little bit, and we can kind of keep bouncing back and forth as the hour goes on.
Next question's from Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. What subjects do you explain repeatedly that you wish were more commonly known?
Oh my goodness. I think I want to call it, this is probably a little too simplistic, but it's probably the common sense stuff. Like, for every phone call that I get, because we know this, we're probably all that person, whether it's at our workplace or in our families, who, when the phone's not working, when the computer's not working, when something's going wrong, your phone rings. And the first question, and then sure enough, it happened to me today, where I was having an issue, and somebody said, "Did you turn it off and turn it back on? Did we start by just trying to figure out what was there?" And sure enough, I was having this crazy thing where my ATEM was blowing the iris on my 6K up to 1.8, regardless of where I set it, and I looked like I was radioactive. And then Alex is like, "Well, did you turn the ATEM?" I said, "I turned the camera on and off. I restarted the software." He's like, "Well, did you restart the ATEM?" I was like, "Oh, I was that person." Jeff?
I guess probably one of my most common things is that I read or I see or I experience is I have my Wi-Fi connected and the NDI is not working. That's got to be probably the most common. It's like, so don't use Wi-Fi. It's simple. And then the problems will go away a lot of the times. That's probably one of my most repeated things, because there's manufacturers out there that are actually pushing Wi-Fi connected cameras, which is the worst thing ever to think of, but that's what it is.
I'm getting jittery just thinking about it, and I don't think it's the coffee. Alexander?
Oh man, there's just a handful of things. Because I deal with audio every day, and I rent gear to people that have never even used a microphone often. Just basic stuff like the difference between mic and line level. I've seen people plug line level equipment into microphone preamps and have problems, and microphone preamps into line level, and they don't understand the difference. The difference between unbalanced and balanced audio all the time. And then when people rent DMX lighting who have never used DMX before, that think that it's okay to use a low impedance audio cable just because it has an XLR connector. And that's often very confusing point for people that are just getting into lighting, because they see a cable with an XLR jack that can go into a DMX 3-pin port, and they assume that that's going to work reliably. So the difference between the DMX cabling and the regular audio cabling and stuff like that, just fundamental basic stuff, gain structure, that sort of stuff. How do I gain up a microphone properly to get to optimize it properly for the lowest noise floor? That sort of stuff that I see every single day, and I have repeated phone calls every single day from people that just don't understand how to use gear. And that some of those things are pretty audio specific, but if we zoom out, there is, especially now with USB-C, if we're just talking in a general just IT space, there's a lot of confusion over cabling. This is a power-only USB-C. This is a USB 2 USB-C. This is a Cat 5 versus a Cat 6 or a 7. This is the difference between just your regular coax with a BNC and a 12G SDI. This is I think I explain to people on a regular basis that gauge is thicker when the number is lower. And we kind of chuckle at these things, but for people that are just getting started, it's easy to get caught up. They're that PA that gets sent for a quart of elbow grease, and they spend the whole day running around.
But David, go ahead.
Yeah, just aside from my thing about understanding the basics, also there's nothing exceeds like excess. So when reporting problems, and this goes back to the NDI VisRT University training I'm going through. In Troubleshooting 101, it says it's not working. And the next line reads something like, that is an incomplete thing. It's not enough information. So to say something isn't working while under stress and pressure of an event, yeah, that's how it's going to work. But the more information you can provide as to what you tried, what's not working, is going to help whoever's there to help you a lot more efficiently.
And one thing that folks will do when they submit a troubleshooting question to this group is when it is something that's a little bit more involved or a little more tough to understand, when we get links to see what's going on, that can be extremely helpful. But we're always, I feel like every single time someone asks, say, what's the best, or this isn't working, or how could I get around this, we always end up going back to what's the mission? What are we trying to accomplish? What story are we trying to tell? What is the end product? Because ultimately, people don't judge how you got there. They judge what the product was, and so you can't lose sight of that. Oliver, you had a comment?
Yeah, as a software vendor making live streaming software, I mean, we want to make it as easy as possible for people, but there's like I wish there were a sort of a general knowledge about things like that if you have a 500 megabit line at your house, it doesn't mean you have 500 megabit to the ingest servers at YouTube, and that you still can have ingest problems with bandwidth, even if you have a big pipe and the last mile is big enough. But we want to make it as easy as possible, so we try to make our users not have to think about that. But there's a couple of things that you still have to know about if you want to do live streaming, so. Yeah.
Alexander, let's hop on the next question.
All right. We have another Foundational Friday question from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. Tenacious Ventures Studio Tour was a great behind-the-scenes look at a living studio as it was functioning. What BTS location tours should we schedule for future Friday shows?
If only we knew someone with a really cool behind-the-scenes. Oh, wait, Jeff.
I'm open for a little bit more exposure from here and there. I'm actually next week going to be back in tennis for a little while, for a couple of weeks. So there's an opportunity there because we're broadcasting later in the day. So we would actually have some time in the morning. I don't mind opening up. We'll kind of look at it and see what the schedule looks like. But I do believe there's plenty of people out there that like to show off what they do and how they do it. We had I reached out to my friends at the Worry Studios in Vegas and had, I think it was 20 of us or 25 of us that showed up there that we all got to see that studio in action and get a tour of it. And a lot of eyes were opened, to say the least, because if you don't know it exists, you don't know. And it's great to see some of these other things. And I always look at this as a way for people to aspire to be better, or they may just not have been thinking about this as a possibility in general. So there's a lot of eyes that were open to different ways of approaching what we do. And not just in the functionality of plugging this into that to make this happen, but more so in the overall concept of the project and how the production is approached. So I still learn from other people. I'm like, why are you doing it like that? And then they explain it. I'm like, well, that's a good thought. I understand why you did it at that way. And there are others that I'm going like, there's a better way, maybe we could try that on your next event. And they were like, oh yeah, that was better. Thank you. So I'd like to see a little bit more of that sharing of real on-prem type of tours as such.
I think some of the challenge with behind-the-scenes tours is not everybody can show or wants to show what they're doing. It's easy for someone like a Tenacious Ventures who has some really state-of-the-art stuff and is really, kind of pushing the envelope in what's possible and experimenting to go in there and show it off. And it's very pretty. There's a lot of eye candy. In addition to having a good product, I think there's also another angle to this where we look at a behind the scenes of someone who is in a, I don't know if you want to call it a resource starved or a resource constrained environment, where they're still making a really good product, even though they may be a little out of date, or really stretching some equipment that's long in the tooth. I think there's room here on how do you achieve your goals on a specific budget. And this is, I was at a studio a week or two ago that they were like, yeah, our upgrade's been getting pushed off for a few years, and then we're 2 years away from being 2 years all the time. And then they kind of chuckled, and you looked around, and you could tell that when you looked at what they were, I can't talk too much about it, but when you looked at what they were outputting, it was really, really cool stuff. And then you looked at how they were getting there, and it was just like, wow, that's awesome. Sorry, go ahead, David.
Yeah, to that, and I appreciate that insight, CJ, because that's part of the thing too with making do with what you have kind of approach to things. Granted, where I work, I wish I could do a BTS, but kind of restricted in what I can show. There have been times at older locations where I did give the graveyard tour of all this old gear that was getting removed, and it was kind of fun, but it was an after hours thing and not for public consumption. But the gear acquisition syndrome is real, but sometimes the old stuff can solve a problem quicker and easier if it's already out at hand, rather than having to purchase something new and relearn things just to get something done.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to say, one of the other ones out there that I've been watching some of their content and I really enjoy it. They do a behind the scenes for a lot of their events. It's called Socially You, and they are producing some really, really outstanding webcast content, and they have managed to leverage the Unreal Engine. So they have a lot of their content is based off of a green screen studio, and they're working it. They are really working it, and that would be a fantastic way of interacting with them. I'd love to get them invited in and bring part of it. So that would be someone we could definitely look out and reach out to. I have a couple contacts there that we may be able to leverage a little bit. But having some of these studios out there, you just don't even know they exist, but they're putting out some fantastic content. Another one would be really, really amazing to bring into the thing. I can't remember his name because I just blanked. But Socially You is socially with the letter U on YouTube, and they have some fantastic behind the scenes. Yesterday, I just eliminated my history, so I'm trying to catch up with what I was looking at yesterday. And it's a gentleman that is in Austin now, Christian, I want to say, Christian Williamson, is that right? That does a podcast, and it is really well produced. It is just speaking one-on-one, doing that kind of thing. And we're not all doing sports here. We're not all doing big corporate productions here. There are many of us like Alexander that's just doing a podcast thing with a guy on a couch or whatever, and there's nothing to say that we can't use pieces from each one of these to accent and bring the production value up. I'm going to look up this other guy's information. I'll come back with you in a minute on that.
And if you need a more direct way of getting this message, if you have a studio and you are part of this community and you think it would be cool to share it with us, reach out. You can send me a message on Discord, and then I can pass it on to our folks who do we have these councils. So we have a Friday council that helps program what the Fridays are going to be, and we always try to stay about 2 months out. in terms of what are we thinking of, and we have a regular cadence. But if you haven't noticed about, we'll right now the format is we will have 2 weeks out of the month where we're talking and we're leaning on the panel, and then we have 2 weeks out of the month where we try to look externally and we try to bring in external guests, whether that's a vendor or whether that's someone who's active and a luminary, so to speak, that's active in the community and can talk to the things that are relevant to us, and so we're always looking to expand, and it's a great way to network when you contribute on the panel and you contribute on the show. It's pretty amazing how quickly you make friends. Go ahead, Jeff.
Chris Williamson. And I had most of it right. I was juggling between multiple YouTube logins, so I had to look through the history on each one of them to see which one I was logged in at the time. But Chris Williamson, fantastic podcaster, just doing simple interviews and stuff, and the production value is really high. And so it's a great way that maybe we could get him involved too and have him drop by and give us a tour, because what they were doing for where they really progressed from basic stuff to some really elaborate stuff using Unreal and LED volumes too.
I think one thing, I'm going to interject here for a little bit and then we can pop back into questions. But one of the things that I'm really and by the way, if you have feedback, if you have ideas, if you have what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see more of, this is the day where we're kind of taking a step back and evaluating where we're at. So we'd love to hear from you. The one thing that I was thinking of from a IT infrastructure logistics, just the like David said, the foundational piece of what we all do. It's something we don't talk a whole lot about is when we go through hardware upgrade cycles. We're always talking about and excited about what's new. Sony's got a new camera, Blackmagic's got a new camera, Apple's got new laptops and iPads. But then what's the plan for, how are you capitalizing that? How are you determining when you're paying for it, when you're getting ROI? But also, what are you doing with and how are you repurposing that older gear? That stuff that is not cutting edge anymore, but still has a lot of utility. I think when you look around this community and you see older tech used in more of an appliance single-use way, I think that's really powerful. For example, I have an iPad here that is an older iPad, but I have it running something just off screen here. And all I use it for anymore, because it's 5 or 6 years old, is a single-use application for this show. But it wasn't until someone else on office hours mentioned, like, oh yeah, I'm using an iPad for a clock because that's all it's good for anymore. I was like, oh, wait, I don't have to have this, 10-inch iPad sit in the case with the drone and I take it out only when I fly it as the controller. I can use this for something else. Alexander?
Yeah, what you just said actually really kind of sparked my interest and makes me think that it would be a very interesting second hour to talk about that very thing, about how we can repurpose older hardware, because I just feel like there's so much waste now with electronics now, where things just go to the dumpster, right? Or get we can recycle some of this stuff, but I think that would be a very interesting second hour, like creative use cases of how we can repurpose older hardware and find new life for stuff that you can't necessarily use it as your main production system if it's a computer, but maybe it would be still good as a dedicated task for or dedicated for lighter duty of something that is still useful for what you're doing.
I rescued the iMac back here in the corner from a dumpster. It's an iMac that was in the computer lab at an elementary school, and it still has it has an iMovie project in there of like the kindergartners or something, and I got a chuckle out of it. But it still runs OS 9, which I love because I have a couple things that I need that for. And it was going to go to the dumpster, and I thought that would be a real shame. And then so now that's running the toasters. I didn't have it running for a while, but I booted it up the other day to try to get a visualizer, an iTunes visualizer running to respond to a question, but I couldn't get there in time. And it's not. And then the other one is this 27-inch iMac it got struck by lightning, and my grandfather didn't have it plugged into a surge protector. But the solitaire game he likes to play only runs on Snow Leopard and earlier. So I had to get another 2009 iMac and take the hard drive out because heaven forbid, we lost the 91,000 game streak of wins in solitaire. But sometimes it's art, but really there's probably a use for most of the things we have, and if we can do the reuse part more, I think that also makes us feel better about not throwing so much stuff in the dumpsters. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, the TAM behind me here, that used to be my main entertainment
You know how
system.
jealous I am of that, by the way?
It still
every
boots,
time you
but
come on.
I can only
I've
run
seen
it
it
during the
live.
winter because it's a space heater. But it still runs.
Did I see you grab a Newton there for a second?
Yeah,
you going in the back?
there's a Newt 2000 up there somewhere. But the other thing, like in regards with old iPads, even though I'm in broadcast media as a company, I don't have a cable subscription. I still do everything over the air. And I actually use a HD home run for my TV here. But then with all these old iPads that I've recycled, I use VLC on them. I can pull any of those things. So now I have little mobile TVs sitting up on the deck or in my bedroom. They make great little fall asleep TVs. It's wonderful.
All right. So we'll put either there's probably two besides the by the way, speaking of second hours for Fridays, the David, we need you to do one on MIDI because you got so that attracted so much attention. Now I was like,
I'll reach out to George Kennedy too, because George and I are both on the MIDI forums on Facebook. He uses it a lot, and I just love the product. And
that'd be great. And then the other two that I think we came up with there are, how do you plan a hardware upgrade cycle, whether that's your cameras, your computers, your network infrastructure, et cetera. And then, creative reuses of aging tech. So we're getting a couple good ideas. Why don't we let's pop into the next comment about brainstorming.
Next one's from Andy Kokendorfer in Vieira, Florida. When will we begin to see office hours on social platforms other than YouTube, LinkedIn?
I know that Alex has talked about streaming on LinkedIn as something that he wants to be careful about, just because office hours as a group, or as an organization, doesn't necessarily have a huge LinkedIn following. So if it's going out to LinkedIn, it's probably would be going out on Alex's channel, and so he's got to manage those connections. This one might be a better one to bring back on a Sunday. Andy, I know that that's when we might be able to talk into a little bit more on what the plans are. I know that we've done a little bit of multi-streaming to different YouTube channels, but I don't know, and somebody can correct me, I don't know that we've done a lot of streaming into multiple platforms at the, but hopefully we'll see that back on Sunday. Next question or comment.
Next one's from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. What practical demonstrations of tech or procedures might be a topic that can be covered in the second hour?
Well, I know that we, the first one that we really want to see is we want to see Jeff Keithley's infrastructure on the back end, how he's plugging this stuff together. I think it also would be cool to do because we did a little bit of a postmortem on how we nabbed Vegas on the NAB coverage, but the way that rig came together, whether it was the live view that was on the ground, I know Jeff brought a live view as well, and the FS6 with the Vislink rig and the Zoom two-way. I don't know if that rig is something that we could expand to a second hour. Probably if we tried. I mean, goodness, we've talked gaffer tape, but we should at some point do a wiring diagram of what was the back end of that, and really not just talk about what did the coverage end up being, but how did the network infrastructure and the video and the audio backhauls work? Because I mentioned a little earlier that I was down at at a local arena here talking to a video team for a professional sports team, and I had a relationship with somebody on the team, and so I was just meeting some of the folks there, and they were just really, really great. And then I was trying to explain what office hours was, and then I was like, "Well, you got to see what we did at NAB." And I was like, "Oh, you were at NAB?" I was like, "Oh yeah, we had a booth at NAB." And then all of a sudden, they lean in a little bit more, and then they were super impressed by the desk setup, and they were super impressed by all of the FR7s and the system that Kevin had built on the kind of the on the ground studio. But when I showed Edwin with that rig on his shoulder with the Franken rig, which it was built out a little extra on purpose to try and gather attention. But when I explained what we were doing, all of a sudden their minds were kind of blown at the possibilities and that got them really interested. So it made me think we could try and get a little bit more mileage out of how we built those rigs together, and then what really did we need to think about in order to get those signals back and forth on the floor in a live environment. But then also getting the video backhaul into we also haven't done I think years and years ago, and maybe not years and years ago, but I think last year we did a focus on how office hours works. And so we talked about our production back end. And the other thing would be, at some point, I think we should talk a little bit about Zoom Production Studio and how that's been working, because we've been playing with that on the weekends a little bit, and we're figuring out. It's a newer product, and we're Zoom's been super receptive with feedback, and it's been a great back and forth. But at some time, it would be great to talk about kind of the technical side of doing that, and hopefully we're not encroaching on the video day. And that's one of the things that's hard about Friday, when you think about it from the infrastructure, logistics, IT perspective, is that we do bleed over into almost every other vertical. Because sooner or later, if we're talking about cabling, we're talking about plugging in cameras, or we're talking about plugging in a switcher or a mixer, or we're talking about the producing and the planning of content, and how are we organizing all the disparate groups that are coming together in order to have a live show go together on time. And then that starts to spill over a little bit into the business side. And so I don't want to steal from anybody, but there's a lot that we can dig into here. Go ahead, Jeff.
Key word is foundational. There we go. Everything is built on what we do on Fridays. Everything else is just a little vertical. This is the most important day of the week.
Got to be careful. I won't be able to get my head through that door. It's a lot of pressure, but it is true. What we're working on and what we're talking about does touch every little bit, and spending the time and the energy on focusing that we've got the foundation sturdy and set, and that we're built on rocks and not on sand, takes a lot of pressure off the rest of because you can have great looking cameras, you can have great sounding microphones, you can have the best LED wall with the perfect bokeh on it, with no moire, with a small dot pitch. If something happens to that signal on the way to your switcher, or if you don't, or if it doesn't get out to wherever your audience is, it's all for naught. So, yeah, it's good to think about. Let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from Paul Wall, who's in Austin, Texas. What about have a feature in After Hours where you could do an instant show, quickly assemble a crew, and test out a concept?
It's a little tough. The tough thing is, I like the idea, and I think one of the cool things about After Hours is when you open it up and pop on, even if there's 30 people in there and no one has video on, and when you start talking, and you turn your camera on and start, talking about what you're doing or asking for help or asking for advice and starting the conversation, people start putting their cameras on and they'll help you out. The tough thing about the quote unquote instant show, at least in the way that I'm understanding it, is that, you know, a lot of us are working. Sometimes on the weekends, you know, I'll hang out for a couple hours, but most of the week I have a tough time putting after hours on in the background just because you know, my phone rings and I'm in meetings and I'm doing a lot of stuff. But it's definitely, I think one of the, and this is probably more of a Sunday thing too, but when you look at what we've done with some of the breakout rooms for video testing and audio testing, that's been pretty successful in the past. But we'll take a look at it. Go ahead, Alexander.
It just seems like something that would be really hard to do, but I feel like maybe we need to have like a designated name called the A-Team, that we can assemble a group of people. If you have a problem, if no one else can help.
I have a red phone. It's going to ring. I've got to drop everything. Sorry. You know, it's just because it's got to be the A-Team for Alexander. We know where you're at. It's fine. It's fine. Why don't we, let's hop into the next question.
Next one comes from Andy Kokendorfer in Viera, Florida. Thoughts on having a vendor guest offer giveaway to live audience to bill viewers? Say Shure provides a mic to an audience member selected at random. From my days in broadcast news, nothing increases viewers like giveaways during sweeps.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I kind of agree. I don't know. I just don't want it to be false input, or I guess you would say false attendance. You know, I want people to come because they want to hear the content, they want to see the content, they want to experience what we're creating here and sharing, not just because we're giving away a mic flag or something of that nature, or even a free subscription to a software or something like that. I don't know. I just don't agree with that. Coming from someone that is in retail sales or in sales, and I just disagree with the whole, you have to give away something to get somebody to pay attention. That's just me.
And there's a certain degree of that we don't want it to cheapen the show and make it feel like a gimmick. That, hey, you know, people are just coming for the low hanging fruit. Where I do think little insider things are valuable is where it's not, I'm not giving you something that's a thing, but I'm giving you something to solicit an opinion. And that's where when we can beta test software or get early access to new features to then give our feedback on. Because when you look in the Discord and you look, there's a few thousand people in there. There's a tremendous amount of experience and a tremendous amount of different use cases that can take advantage of these different tools. And that's where when vendors are coming in and they're testing things out, we always chuckle because it seems like we always have an opinion. We always have, hey, could you do this? Could you move this here? Could you move that there? And we end up providing a service to the whole community when we can offer that feedback and that insight. We have a joke where I work that we're professional vendor trainers, because every single vendor that comes in, regardless of, you know, what they're offering to us, by the time they're done working with us, they are better suited to serve the rest of their customers, because you know, we're not shy about saying, hey, you know, you should move this, you should tweak that. What if you did this way? Because I might not have the skills to build what you build or provide what you provide. But fish don't know they're wet sometimes, most of the time. So I'm going to give you an outsider's perspective. And again, then that loops back more into why I think office hours is so valuable, and especially when you're talking about the foundational technology that's at the basis of everything we do. All of this different life experience comes in and really creates, in aggregate, a tremendous amount of valuable experience. Let's cruise on to the next question.
Next question is from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. What products, vendors, or services could the Friday show feature on multi-streaming topics?
Jeff? Oh, can't hear you, Jeff.
It's because I was muted. And that's, again, a perfect example of sometimes stuff happens. I would need a little bit definition of what's multi-streaming topics. To me, multi-streaming would be multi-destination. I don't know, Josh, maybe we could get a little clarification in the chat about what that is. For products, vendors, services, I started the ones I use, right? So I would want to have somebody like Roberto from NDI to come in and give us some background about things that they're doing new, and also some use cases that they're doing maybe we haven't thought about. I'd love to have someone show us things from VizRT, somebody from Dreamcatcher for replay, because that would appeal to like 2 people that are watching, but it would be something that people haven't seen and reasons on how to use it. And then also things like on the audio side, I Audinate, have them show us what Dante Connect is all about. I know the guy that's the head of production or head of the product there, so I'd be glad to invite him to come in and give us a idea of how that product's being used in small and large scale events. I feel like there's a lot of people that we in products and vendors that we all use that we could easily reach out to and get some information. I would say excluding Blackmagic, because they only want to do things in a webcam, web stream type process and send it one way. They're not exactly two-way, except at the trade shows. You see a lot of content on them from trade shows, but other than that, we don't see how many times do you see them out talking to people like us or on podcasts and things like that, just in general, that's not at a trade show pushing whatever's the latest thing that was announced. So I would venture to say, let's reach out to the people that are being interactive. The guys at Llama, for instance, that are doing audio mixing in both virtualization and cloud and also on-prem, they're absolutely ready to come. I've had a conversation today where I've got a meeting with them about that exact thing. They want to be involved and they want to talk to people and they want to show people the product, but they also want to get input from people. And I think that's the key thing is here. We can feed back to those manufacturers more information than they would ever get doing like a small sample study type thing where they're just getting a small sample size, and it may or may not be. We're people that are using the tools. So we should be able to share with them, okay, this is a pain point. You really should adjust this. And I think that's probably one of our biggest things is we should be able to bring people on pretty quickly. And it's just a matter of persistence, I believe.
I think external vendors in general, especially people like Audinate who would have come on at NAB, who we have a relationship with already. And I think we had so many vendors on that could talk to so many different things. And even though, Audinate might feel like, okay, this is going to fall into an audio day, or, Aperture lighting might seem like it falls into a video day. When you talk specifically about how do you set up Aperture Infinimat, where that was I believe it was called Infinimat, the product where the lighting was reacting to whatever video signal was on the screen to give you realistic environmental lighting. That technical back end is worth digging into, and it's worth trying to figure out how can we showcase that. But let's go on to the next question.
Next question is from Ryan Thomason in Houston, Texas. What about a deeper dive into Mukana?
Ryan, this is another great example of a Sunday question. The fact that you ask about Mukana hopefully tells me, and based on a little logo that I see, it tells me you're in Mukana, so you can every Sunday. It's not available for video on demand, but it is something that we stream into Mukana and over YouTube. It's just not available for consumption later. Worth coming in on a Sunday and asking that question. That's where we can be a little bit talk a little bit more freely. That's something that is a proprietary software that we don't want to necessarily give away the secret sauce on. But I know that Alex is really passionate about its potential and the capabilities, and he's always hosting on Sunday, so that's a great time to ask that question. Let's hop on to the next one.
Next one's from Craig McFarland in Boston, Massachusetts. How about a minimum approach for security? With 75% of businesses impacted by ransomware, how do you spend the least to protect yours?
It is important, Craig, and I appreciate you asking that or bringing up that comment, because even though that is the not most glamorous part about what we all do, how we're keeping our network secure and how we're making sure that our productions aren't affected by any sort of cyber threats is so important. If your production is running over network solutions and you're running your production in the cloud, or you're running your remote controlling a machine over a VPN with Splashtop, your ability to have a rock solid connection to that machine that can't be impacted by anybody else and can't be hijacked is so important. So we should definitely throw that into the chat. That's going to wrap it up. Thanks everyone for putting in all your questions and for helping us kind of brainstorm about where the excitement and where the interest is. A special thank you to a great panel today. We had a couple people had to drop a little early because they had other commitments, but none of us is as smart as all of us. I say that all the time, but we came close today. We had some pretty brilliant people on the panel, so it was great to get your input. Also, thank you to all the producers who asked questions, keeping us on our toes, making sure that we get our wheels turning in the right direction. And thank you to the back-end crew who wakes up 7 days a week, gets this on. It really does an incredible job of cutting the show, making sure we look and sound good, developing the systems that run our show on the back end. We could never do this without you. Thank you so much. Flawless traversal today, 48,000 miles, 77,000 kilometers, which is 377 million bananas for scale. We'll see you in after hours. Bye, everyone.
Good stuff. Thank you, CJ. Thank you, Alex.
We
Good show.
definitely need a second hour on MIDI. That was really cool.
Yeah, I love the product. Much to the chagrin of some of my colleagues, but my gain is their loss, but it's all good.
No worries.
Yeah, the functionality that they've been adding, and Tomas, the developer, is open to listening to things, and I'm on his beta program, so it's good stuff. Yeah, but download it. It took $20 limit just to get the hang of it. The companion modules are solid, gives complete feedback and everything. It's wonderful.